The Blackwood estate loomed under a dark eerie sky, its grand exterior now a silent witness to a terrible betrayal. Inside, the stillness was shattered by a frantic 911 call, a voice trembling with fear. "He's not moving." "Who's not moving, ma'am?" The dispatcher's voice cut through the panic. The call ends abruptly. Seconds later, police sirens scream through the night, racing toward the mansion. When the officers arrive, they find a body, lifeless, cold, near the pool house. A father and son, bound by blood, now torn apart by the same woman. But how? And why? What could drive a man to murder his own flesh and blood over a woman who wasn't even his to begin with? This is the story of love, betrayal, and greed, where everything they built was destroyed by a single manipulative woman. Welcome to True Crime Stories Arena. Before we dive into this shocking case, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the most jaw-dropping, unbelievable true crime stories we uncover. Now, let's unravel the twisted world of the Blackwood family and discover how a deadly combination of greed and manipulation led to a tragedy no one could have predicted. Victor Blackwood, at 65 years old, was a man who everyone feared but few truly respected. He had built a massive empire full of wealth and power over decades, but inside, he was falling apart. The death of his wife 2 years ago left a hole in his heart. He tried to numb the pain with alcohol, but it only made things worse. To the outside world, he was still the powerful crime lord, but behind closed doors, Victor was broken and alone. His relationship with his son, Damien, was cold and distant. He didn't know how to love, and it seemed like he didn't even want to try. Damien Blackwood, at 30 years old, was the only son of Victor, the heir to a massive empire. He was handsome and charming, but he felt the weight of his father's coldness every day. Damien wanted nothing more than to earn his father's approval, but no matter what he did, Victor always treated him like he wasn't enough. Damien felt trapped. He lived in the shadow of a man who built an empire with ruthlessness. Damien wanted to be his own person, but how could he when his father's expectations were so high? Every day, Damien tried to prove he could be more than just the son of Victor Blackwood, but the more he tried, the more he felt like he would never escape his father's shadow. The Blackwood family was no stranger to elite galas. They attended them regularly, events full of the city's wealthiest and most influential people. Crime bosses, cartel leaders, top businessmen, and the most powerful figures in the underworld always gathered in these exclusive spaces. But there was one gala, one night, that changed everything for them. It was a gala unlike any other. A night where secrets would be exposed, where choices would be made that could destroy everything. Damien, looking proud and confident, introduced Serena to his father, Victor, at the gala. The air was thick with luxury and whispered power as they mingled with the other high society members. Victor's eyes lingered on Serena a little too long, and she noticed it immediately. The unspoken attraction between them was clear, a tension that neither could ignore. Serena felt it too and knew this was the moment to begin her plan. Serena Vale, only 24 years old, had learned early on how to use her beauty and charm to get what she wanted. Born into chaos and poverty, she quickly realized the power she had over men and how she could use it to manipulate them. Her beauty was her weapon, and she wielded it to control and exploit the powerful men around her. When she met Victor and Damien, she didn't just see two rich men, she saw a way to take over their family's fortune. To her, they were nothing more than pawns in a deadly game of power, manipulation, and betrayal. A few days after the gala, Serena accidentally ran into Victor at a private lounge. She had planned this moment carefully, making sure it felt like a coincidence, as if fate had brought them together. Victor was there, sitting at the bar, enjoying a rare quiet moment away from his empire of power. Serena approached him, her steps measured and graceful, her smile soft but calculated. She introduced herself with a faint innocence, playing the role of the naive young woman looking for guidance from a man she believed to be wise beyond measure. Victor, despite his years of experience and sharp instincts, was drawn to her charm. He saw in her a kind of vulnerability that made him want to protect her, and she knew exactly how to feed that instinct. She spoke of her ambitions, her dreams of understanding the underworld, and how she admired his strength. The ego boost was undeniable, and it worked. He agreed to mentor her. But as their conversations continued, the lines began to blur quickly. Serena's presence seemed to reignite something in Victor. He felt powerful, younger, and more desired in her company. The more he taught her about his world, the more she fed his ego, suddenly making him feel like the most important man in her life. Victor, the crime lord who had seen it all, had never felt so alive, so in control of his own desires again. He saw Serena as a project, someone to guide, someone to shape, but he didn't see the trap she was setting. At the same time, she was playing a different game with Damien. She whispered lies to him when they were alone, feeding his insecurities like poison. She made him believe that his father, the man who had always been emotionally distant, was secretly plotting against him. "You know your father is jealous of you, right?" she asked one evening, her voice soft and coaxing. "He's planning to take the empire from you. And he'll replace you with someone else. He wants to get rid of you." Damien, already battling the shadows of his father's coldness, felt the sting of those words deep in his gut. The tension between father and son began to grow, fueled by Serena's lies, which turned Damien's admiration for his father into a toxic mix of resentment and fear. Meanwhile, Serena was working her magic on Victor, too. "You don't know what Damien says behind your back," she hinted one evening. "He's planning to overthrow you. He wants to take your empire and your power. He wants to replace you." Those words dug into Victor's mind, planting a seed of suspicion and paranoia. He had always thought of Damien as his successor, the heir to his empire, but now, he was starting to see him differently. Less as a son, and more as a rival. As the days passed, the tension between father and son grew thicker. Damien began to pull away, distancing himself from his father in a way that felt like betrayal to Victor. Victor, in turn, started seeing threats where there were none, convinced that his son was plotting against him. Both men were playing into Serena's hands, unaware that she was the one orchestrating their fall. The tension between father and son reached a boiling point, and the only thing they didn't realize was that they were being played by the woman who had quietly become the most dangerous player of all. The Obsidian Club event was the kind of gathering where the city's wealthiest and most powerful came to see and be seen. The event was in full swing, the rich gathered in their finest attire, talking business and exchanging whispers. But the usual flow of calm and composure was shattered when Victor Blackwood and his son Damien got into a heated argument in front of everyone. The tension between them had been building for weeks, but tonight, in the midst of the glitz and glamour, it boiled over. Damien, his face flushed with frustration, slammed his hand against the marble countertop, his voice rising. "What the hell is wrong with you, Dad? I've worked my ass off for this family, for this empire, and you treat me like I'm your enemy." Victor's cold eyes locked onto his son's, the years of distance between them coming to a head. "You think you've earned it? You've done nothing but hide behind me, Damien. You're a disappointment," he spat, his voice low and full of venom. Damien's chest tightened, the words cutting deeper than any punch could. "I'm trying to prove myself to you, but you don't even care." His fists clenched at his sides. "I've tried everything to make you proud, but nothing's good enough. I can't keep doing this, Dad." A tense silence followed, but only for a moment. The murmurs of the other guests grew louder as the argument became the center of attention. Damien's frustration had reached its peak, his voice filled with a mixture of pain and rage. "You've always treated me like I was never enough, like I'd never live up to your legacy. What the hell do you want from me?" Victor took a step closer, his towering presence over Damien overwhelming. "I want you to stop acting like you can replace me. You've been plotting behind my back to take over, haven't you? Trying to tear down everything I've built." The words hit Damien like a slap to the face. "That's not true, and you know it." He was barely holding back the anger that bubbled up inside him. The crowd around them was watching intently, eyes wide, their whispers quick and sharp, spreading the story of the Blackwood family's dirty laundry. The empire that had once been untouchable, the crime legacy that commanded fear and respect, was starting to crumble before their very eyes. As the heated argument raged on, Serena watched from across the room, a sly smile playing at the corner of her lips. She knew exactly what she was doing. Behind the scenes, she had been feeding Victor's insecurities, whispering lies about Damien's intentions. She had told Victor that Damien had become abusive, that he was no longer the son Victor thought he knew. To make her lies believable, she had staged injuries, bruises that she claimed came from Damien. She told Victor that his son had started to lash out, making him look like a threat. The seed of doubt she planted had grown into full-blown paranoia, and now, the father and son were spiraling out of control. Victor could hardly see past the lies anymore. His mind was clouded by the false belief that his own son was trying to overthrow him, and it fueled the growing distance between them. The anger in the room was palpable, and the damage was done. The Blackwood name, once known for its strength and unity, was now whispered about in circles, its legacy hanging by a thread. The argument ended with both men standing in a tense silence, the weight of their words settling in the air between them. The guests at the gala were left in shock, exchanging glances, their gossip spreading faster than the fire that now burned through the Blackwood family. And Serena, from the shadows, watched as her plan took root. Two men, both broken, both desperate, and both on the brink of destroying everything. After the event, things only got worse. As the days passed, Victor's paranoia grew stronger. He had always been a man of power, surrounded by a network of loyal security guards, his empire built on intimidation and control. But now, things were different. His son, Damien, had become an unpredictable threat in his mind. Victor had begun to feel like his empire was slipping through his fingers, and the one person he once trusted the most now seemed like the greatest danger. The power that had once been so comforting now felt like a fragile facade. He started carrying a gun at all times, even though he had never needed one before. His bodyguards, once a reassuring presence, now seemed useless in a world where his own son could betray him. He spent his nights awake, staring into the darkness of his mansion, convinced that Damien was plotting something. Something that would bring him down. Meanwhile, Serena worked her magic from behind the scenes. She selectively edited recordings of private conversations between Victor and Damien, twisting the words, turning them into something they were never meant to be. She leaked these recordings to Victor, playing on his deepest fears, pushing him further into paranoia with each passing day. Her control over both men grew stronger. One cold midnight, the tension reached its peak. Damien was at the estate, still grappling with the distance between him and his father. His mind was a mess, torn between wanting to prove himself and the constant pushback from Victor. Then, his phone buzzed, a text from Serena. "Meet me at the pool house. Now." His heart raced. He didn't question it. Something about her had always pulled him in, even when he knew it was dangerous. When he arrived at the pool house, the door creaked open to reveal Serena standing there, bruised and shaken, her face twisted in fear. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Your father did this to me." Her words were laced with a perfect mix of pain and fear, designed to make him feel a rush of anger and protectiveness. Damien's chest tightened, his mind racing. "What do you mean? What happened?" he asked, his voice low and filled with confusion. Before she could answer, the door slammed open, and Victor stormed in, his gun drawn, his eyes wild with suspicion and anger, locked onto his son. "You've become a threat, Damien," Victor growled, his voice full of rage. Damien froze, his mind flashing through the moments of tension between them. His father was no longer the man he once knew. He was someone else now, someone dangerous. Fear surged through Damien. Was his father really going to kill him? In a panic, Damien reached for his own weapon, desperate to protect himself from the man he had once looked up to. The sound of metal scraping against leather echoed in the silence, but before Damien could fully draw his weapon, a shot rang out. The world seemed to slow down as Damien's body jerked, the impact of the bullet sending him crashing to the floor. The shock was immediate, his breath catching in his throat as he collapsed, pain and confusion flooding his senses. Serena stood in the background, watching with cold eyes as Victor stared down at his son's body, his hands still gripping the gun. The shock on Victor's face was evident, he couldn't believe what he had just done. His mind raced, but there was no going back now. Damien was dead. And Victor was left with the weight of his actions hanging over him. In a moment of frantic panic, Serena quickly dialed 911, her voice shaky as she pretended to be the victim of an attack. "Help, he's not moving, he's not breathing," she cried, her words designed to make her sound innocent and terrified. She hung up the phone, her eyes glinting with satisfaction as she saw Victor's shock and confusion. Victor Blackwood stood motionless, staring down at his son's lifeless body. The weight of what he had done crushed him. A man who had spent his entire life building an empire of power and influence now found himself helpless, unable to undo the damage he had caused. His son, the one person who had been his blood, his legacy, was gone. He could only stand there, frozen, as Serena's manipulation had led to this irreversible moment. When the police arrived, Victor didn't resist. There was no fight left in him. He knew what he had done, and he knew he couldn't escape it. Serena, watching from the shadows, could hardly contain her satisfaction. Her plan was nearly complete. She had played both men like pawns in a game she had orchestrated from the beginning. Damien was dead. Victor was arrested. And soon, the Blackwood family's empire would be hers. But her satisfaction would not last. Detective Elena Reyes, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years of experience, stood over the crime scene, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. She had seen many tragedies in her time, but something about this case didn't sit right. It wasn't just the murder of Damien Blackwood that troubled her, it was the woman at the center of it all. Serena Vale. Serena seemed too perfect. Too poised. Too controlled, like she was playing a role rather than living out a tragedy. Detective Reyes wasn't easily fooled. She had an instinct for spotting lies, and right from the start, something about Serena didn't add up. Her story was too clean. Her reactions too rehearsed. As she dug deeper into Serena's life, Elena uncovered things she wasn't expecting. Serena's past wasn't as innocent as it seemed. The young woman who had so easily wormed her way into the Blackwood family had ties to a ruined businessman named Richard Vale. Richard had spent years plotting revenge against Victor Blackwood, a vendetta born from a business deal gone wrong, a betrayal that had cost him everything. Serena wasn't just a simple model. She was connected to a dangerous underworld of illegal business dealings and revenge-driven plots. Elena's investigation uncovered chilling details. There were financial transfers between Serena and Richard that couldn't be explained away. Staged injuries, which Serena had claimed were the result of abuse, were linked to her own manipulations. The bruises, carefully placed for maximum effect. There were also leaked texts between her and Victor, each one subtly twisting the truth, feeding his growing paranoia. When confronted with the evidence, Serena's carefully constructed facade began to crack. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, like a cornered animal who knew the game was up. But even then, she wasn't completely honest. She confessed, but only to everything except one thing, her involvement in Damien's death. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered, a touch of guilt in her voice, but her cold smile never left her lips. Her only real regret: that Damien was dead. The truth about Richard Vale, the mastermind pulling her strings, also came to light. He had been plotting for years, using Serena as his tool to get close to Victor. It became clear that Serena had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. And now, both of them were exposed. Victor sat in the courtroom, his once powerful figure now broken, his face a mask of regret. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on him as he listened to the judge's words. He had spent his entire life building an empire, controlling the underworld with ruthless precision, but it had all come crashing down in the blink of an eye. His son, Damien, his flesh and blood, was gone. And Victor knew it was his own fault. The man who had once feared no one now feared himself. As the judge delivered the sentence, Victor felt his heart sink. He had pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, the result of his own blind paranoia. A moment of rage he could never take back. 20 years to live with the knowledge that he had taken his son's life. 20 years to wonder if he could have done something differently, if he could have been a better father. But no matter how many years were handed down, it would never be enough to make up for the loss he felt inside. He had failed as a father. As a man. And now, his empire was nothing more than a distant memory. In the shadows of the courtroom, Serena sat with a cold smile, the weight of her conviction not reaching her eyes. 10 years in prison. She should have felt regret. She should have felt something. But all she felt was satisfaction, knowing that she had won. She had taken everything from them. Everything that mattered. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she simply smiled, her lips curling in a quiet, cold satisfaction. She had no remorse. No apology. Only a sense of victory, knowing that she had manipulated them all. She had gotten what she wanted. And she didn't care who she had to hurt to get there. Detective Elena Reyes stood in the back of the courtroom, her sharp eyes never leaving Serena. She had seen many cases over the years, but this one felt different. It wasn't just the murder. It was the manipulation. The lies. The way people used each other as pawns in their own twisted games. Power. Greed. Betrayal. It never ends well, Elena thought to herself, her voice quiet but firm in her mind. She had seen it in so many faces over the years, people who thought they could control everything, only to find that the price of power was too high. In the end, Victor Blackwood and Serena Vale were just two more examples of that truth. And as the failed businessman who had been working behind the scenes was sentenced, Elena knew that the cycle of destruction would continue. Another life ruined. Another empire fallen. And still, there were others out there, waiting for their turn to play the game. As the dust settled, the Blackwood family's legacy lay in ruins, shattered by betrayal, greed, and manipulation. Victor Blackwood, once a powerful crime lord, was left to grapple with the weight of his actions. His son, Damien, was gone, and all that remained was the painful realization that he had destroyed the one person who had meant everything to him. Serena, the woman who had orchestrated it all, walked away with a smile, her conviction not enough to make her feel any remorse. What do you think? Was Serena's plan truly justified in her mind, or was she simply a manipulator who tore a family apart for her own gain? And what about Victor? Could he have saved his son, or was the weight of his own choices too much to overcome? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel here on True Crime Stories Arena. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the most shocking stories that leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Because in the end, the darkest truths are always the ones we need to see.